Okay, so the next concept we want to talk about is work. So work is the one that we commonly use to measure volume, and as discussed in the last video on impulse, it's a little bit flawed because work is a special case of force production. So all work is force that is applied over a distance. So in the imperial system, we commonly use foot-pounds, and the metric system, we're commonly going to use joules. So a foot-pound is simply you applied 1 pound of force over a distance of 1 foot. In the metric system, we applied 1 Newton of force a distance of 1 meter. If I move this object a distance of 1 meter by applying 1 Newton of force, I did 1 joule of work. Likewise, if I apply 10 newtons of force a distance of 1 meter, I did 10 joules of work. Work is one of those things, like, it generally is independent of how much time. So getting a 100 kilogram object from here, getting a 100 kilogram object to move a distance of 1 meter, the total work produced is going to be the same independently from a purely mechanical context. It's going to be the same regardless of whether it took you 2 seconds or 30 seconds. And this is kind of what's interesting about work is so work is kind of central to the concept of energy. On a fine level, we can generally, and this is kind of where we kind of get into how much energy does it take to perform different exercises, because work, joules, we can also convert into things like by how many degrees did the temperature of the water go up. We can use joules to measure things like temperature, motion, basically everything that requires energy of some kind. So then that's kind of the basis of how we determine how many calories do we burn, doing things like running, weightlifting, stuff like that. By measuring things like oxygen exchange rates, and we can basically get a value for those types of activities. So if you kind of remember back to our discussions of force and gravity and acceleration. So if I move this object upwards against gravity, I performed work to do that. Now if I just let the object drop down again, the object moved because gravity moved it. I didn't exert any force on the object, gravity did the work. Now, if I hold this object still and I don't move it, I do no work. Even if I'm producing force is being produced right now, but there's no work being done until I allow the object to move, because units of distance are inherent in the definition of work. Without distance, there can be no work. It doesn't mean that it's not tiring. It just means that, hey, we have other ways of describing things like holding an object steady, in place where there's no motion involved. Now, this is something that's commonly misinterpreted. So if I have an object and I allow it to drop down, a lot of people say, well, gravity did all the work. But if you're moving the object down at a constant velocity, you're still applying a force to that object, even if gravity is the thing that's still making it go downwards. You're still applying a force over that distance to prevent the object from accelerating. So that's still work being done. It's not I'm doing the work, gravity's doing all the work. Gravity's only doing all the work if I just let it drop. If I let the object accelerate to the rate that gravity would dictate, that's when gravity does all the work. As long as you're providing some force to the object that's preventing it from accelerating and you're keeping it moving at a constant velocity, you're still producing work over the distance that you're